Let me think of an intro here for a second. Okay. Should have planned this. Hello, and welcome to whatever we're calling this Deep Space Nine review show. My name is Fletcher. That's Data. No relation to the robot.
Oh, I thought you meant to each other. I was like, that's a weird jump, but okay.
No relation to me either.
Yeah.
Are you related to the robot? I don't want to assume. Is it like a family name in your family of robots?
Yeah, it could be.
Okay. So we'll check Ancestry.com for your... Did you get your Robo DNA and send it to the...
No, that's how they get you, if you send in your DNA out there, you know?
That's how they caught the Golden State Killer. So one of his family members sent in their DNA.
So it's important to not only keep your own DNA to yourself, but make sure everyone else that you're related to does as well. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I always, like, my family's like, oh, I got my DNA tested. I was like, I could have told you you're English. Like, anyway. What were we doing? Okay, today we're reviewing Episode 1, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and 2, Emissary, Part 1 and 2. Alternate title, Baseball, What Is This? So, do you have a point you want to start with, or...
Well, okay, my question is, did you ever see Babylon 5? Because that plays a big part in, like, the origin of the series.
I know the whole drama.
Yeah.
About, like, J. Michael Straczynski tried to bring this to Paramount, and then, mysteriously they came up with the exact same concept for their new Star Trek show. I have watched the first 10 minutes of the first episode of Babylon 5, but it was just like, I was looking at those special effects, and I was just like, I cannot do this right now. Like, this is just not for me right now. But I will revisit this later.
The effects and the prosthetics in the first episode are all kind of like, But to be fair, the prosthetics even in this episode, in this first episode of Deep Space Nine, aren't all on target. I think Quark doesn't change too much, but like Odo looks very different to me than he does later.
Yeah, you might be onto something with that. Like the Odo effects, I felt like looked pretty like experimental, if that's the right word.
Yeah,
like they didn't look quite up to the Odo that I remember from later in the series.
Odo, what a guy! But yeah,
I guess also we'll use that to say let's do like spoilers through this episode.
Okay, yeah,
but not like maybe just like general discussion of stuff that happens later.
That's fair.
So like you've seen the whole series,
yep.
And I've seen the whole series, so there's really no hook in that department. But it's been a while. I haven't watched it since high school. I was TNG fan when I was a kid. When TNG was on.
Yeah. And
then later on, I got into Voyager just because it came on right after X-Files.
Sure.
And then later, I don't remember if you got me into Deep Space Nine, or if I just found it one night or something. It was pretty late. It was like well into the the big main arc that happened in the end of that show. But then, like, there was... Did you ever watch, like, there was that channel that had the... it was like 2 in the morning. It would show 2 episodes of Deep Space Nine.
No, I don't think so. Or I wasn't watching it at 2 in the morning, if I did have it.
Like, I had one of those, like, 13-inch VCR TVs.
Been there.
And so, I would just put, like a what XLP tape in there or whatever, and set it to record like every morning, and that's how I binged the original Deep Space Nine show. Anyway,
I don't remember when I first saw Deep Space Nine. Like, yeah, I was a Next Generation fan. I caught it. It was on like after school or something when I was in middle school, or whatever it was, and I was like, oh, that was like my discovery of Star Trek. And then because of that, I think Next Generation has always been like my favorite. But I honestly think that Deep Space Nine, on the whole, is probably a better show. It's got, like, more character depth, more story, or better story. And part of that is because of how they approach this. And that's part of why I bring Babylon 5 into it, is because it was the furor around that kind of lends itself to the changes they made here. Because back in Next Generation days, like Gene Roddenberry, right, created Star Trek The Next Generation, and he had his ideas that there would be no interpersonal conflict between the main characters, because he said that humanity, the Federation, whatever, had evolved beyond that. They wouldn't disagree with each other. Which, it's like, how do you tell a story about these people that's interesting if they're not allowed to have conflict with each other? Like, conflict is the heart of storytelling. So that held them back some. And then there's also the idea that nobody wanted a more serialized story. If someone had to watch a previous episode to understand the new episode, then they would just not watch it, is what the network said. So even like during The Next Generation, the first few seasons, even two-parters were like discouraged. They didn't want those because they wanted anyone to be able to turn on any episode and be able to watch it.
Right.
And so Babylon 5, when Straczynski is proposing this, is this kind of revolutionary for the time idea that we're going to do a big, long story, and I have like these 5 seasons outlined, and it's like a novel or an opera in this big story. Everything is planned out from the start. And Deep Space Nine picks up some of that as it progresses, not really at the beginning, which one scene in this episode really stands out to me about that is I guess it's several scenes. When Cisco meets the prophets, and they're like, who are you? What is this? Like, they're very confused, and like, this is all new to them. And they're like, oh, well, we exist outside of time, and everything that will happen, everything that has happened, we know it all at the same time.
Right.
And then in later seasons of this show, their interactions with Cisco are very different from what they are here. And he's suddenly, this important figure, which it's like, okay, well, if you should have known that here. Like, this was your chance to build this long story in from the beginning, where they made all these like cryptic remarks, and then when you get into season 6 or 7, it's like, oh, now everything from that first episode that they said makes sense. But I don't think that they had the confidence or the plan that like Babylon 5 had to.
Right. Yeah, I think they probably had a pretty vague idea. Maybe like there would be something bad on the other side of the wormhole, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I have that kind of same complaint without even thinking about later episodes when he shows up and they're like, so what's going on here? And he's like, that's the Cisco. Don't you recognize him? Did they call him the Cisco in this episode? I forget.
I don't think so. I feel like the Cisco is a thing that comes in later, but I could have missed it.
And then Kai Opaka refers to him as the Emissary.
Yep.
Right? But she never really explains what that means.
Nope.
She's just like, you're the Emissary, here's an orb.
Yeah, she's like, oh man, it's so weird that like an off-worlder is destined to be the Emissary or whatever. Well, and she explains that like it's his destiny to find the Celestial Temple. But beyond that, we don't really have any information.
It's your destiny 3 hours from now to find the Celestial Temple.
Yep.
Even though other people have found it before, but they didn't know what it was.
Yep.
Which is another funny thing, is like, this is apparently a really highly trafficked region of space. And I guess just the wormhole opens up all the time, and people are like, whoa, what's that? And nobody went back there to, like, look at it.
They explain that it's like the wormhole's in the Denorius belt, and there's a line where Cisco's like, oh yeah, there's all this crap in there. Like, nobody goes that way unless they have to.
Okay. And then my take on the show overall, because people say, like, a really common, like, way people describe it is it's like, what if the vision of Gene Roddenberry meets the real world, where not everybody shares your ideals or whatever.
Okay.
And I feel like that's actually always been the premise of Star Trek. It's just like the answer to that question was different. Where it's like, in the next gen, they meet people that are, they don't agree with the philosophy and the ideals of the Federation, but like through sticking to those ideals, like, Captain Picard is always able to overcome.
Yeah.
Whereas in this show, like we see at the very beginning, like as soon as Cisco is faced with a dilemma, like with everybody abandoning the promenade, the very first thing he does is he blackmails Quark into staying. And Quark's like, well, I can't run my establishment according to Federation standards. He's like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. Like, pragmatically, we need people to stay on the station and, like, keep this whole thing alive. So,
yeah, I think it's a through line that Cisco is, in a lot of ways, more pragmatic and more willing to do stuff that maybe another captain, or Picard at least, maybe wouldn't have. Because you go all the way back to Kirk, it's like, yeah, Kirk would do anything.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I feel like it does a pretty good job. It does a pretty good job of holding the... So one of my favorite TV shows, The Wire, there's this scene in the last episode where one of our main characters has become the chief of police. And the very first thing that happens is the mayor tells him to lie about the crime statistics because the mayor is running for governor. And the chief of police's wife comes in and is like, you know what, you should just do it. and she says, because the tree that doesn't bend breaks. And, it's like, well, you're going to get kicked out and none of your ideals are going to count for anything anyway if you don't do it.
Okay.
And he looks back at her and he says, if you've been too far, you're already broken. And so I feel like that's kind of like a theme of the show. Especially like as we go along later into like all the, really moral gray areas. Like especially like the Section 31 type plot lines and stuff like that. Where it's like there is pragmatism, but it's, we still have to kind of remember what we're about. And if we bend our rules too much, then we're not the people that we wanted to be.
Yeah.
So that's my take on just like the show as a whole.
I think there's I guess going into more specifics, like I said, I like the depth of the characters in this probably more than some of the other Star Trek shows, because you get like Kira is really interesting, and I know that originally it was supposed to be Ro Laren as this character, and then it becomes somebody else because the actress wasn't available or whatever.
It makes more sense for it to be like Kira.
Yeah, I guess it depends on I mean,
because her allegiances are 100% Bajoran.
To the Bajorans, yeah. She's not like thinking about Starfleet, whatever. She doesn't care about Starfleet at all, which she makes very clear in this episode.
Oh, as we were discussing earlier, Ro Laren does not believe in the Bajoran religion.
Yep.
Even though the Bajoran religion is apparently true.
Yeah, I guess it's true to some extent. I mean, who knows if, like, their beliefs in afterlife or whatever mean anything. Sure. But there really are aliens out there sending them orbs to... Although, from what they say in this episode, they're kind of like, oh, wait, what? We did that? Like, I mean, not on purpose.
They were like, wait, what are you talking about? It's like, orbs? What is this?
We were throwing out some trash, and we didn't know that people were all interested in that.
The consciousness expanding orbs? I mean, you guys don't have those?
But yes, I like the introduction of Kira. Mm-hmm. I really like what they do with Cisco, where he hates Picard, and he has this reason to hate Picard that immediately separates him from the previous series. Where Picard's around, but Cisco doesn't want to talk to him, so you're not going to see him show up.
Yeah, and I love that scene so much when where they're talking to each other, where it's like Cisco wants none of it.
Yep.
And, you can just read his mind in the scene where it's like, here's Picard. He's, like, the loftiest of the lofty in Starfleet. And he wants us to go on this bleeding heart mission to help the Bajorans or whatever. And, I've been there. It's chaos. There's a million different factions. It's all ruins. It's not going to work. Picard doesn't understand what the situation is on the ground. And Picard's like, well, you just got to do it. And Picard kind of comes off as, this arrogant, out-of-touch asshole a little bit in that scene. And it kind of works, because we're kind of with Cisco.
Yeah. And, I mean, I don't know. Picard's trying to be all relatable. I know the Bajorans, which he knows like one Bajoran person.
Yeah,
but
he's like, I've come to love the Bajorans. And it's like, really? I don't know if Rolaren is like the best example.
Yeah, but yeah. And then, yeah, Sisko's just like, he doesn't want to be here. Picard has to ask him to show up more than once, which is not something you do to a superior officer. Like, you don't make them tell you to come to their office multiple times. But he does, and then he's just like, I'm going to do my job, and we're done with, like, I'm standing up. We're done with this conversation now. Like, I've given you the respect that I have to. I'm not giving you anything else.
Exactly. And I like the part where Sisko's like, we've met before. And then Picard's like, oh, he's like, you're the guy who killed my wife. Yep.
He's like, he kind of perks up for a second, like, oh, really? Where'd we meet? And he tells, like, oh, I was on this ship at Wolf 359. And Picard's just like, I'm going to ignore that.
Let's just move on.
Yep.
And another thing I noticed from the scene is Picard has this line, like, you don't always have the luxury of the best circumstances or something like that. And it just sounds really rich coming from, like, he's the captain of the Starfleet flagship.
Yep.
And he has, like, all the top officers in Starfleet, like, working for him. Like, he has Riker and Data and all these, like, ultra-loyal, like, Starfleet people working for him. And it's like, you know, it rings a little hollow when he says that.
Sisko gets O'Brien, so, you know, there's that. Who I loved O'Brien in The Next Generation. It was fun. I feel like they started building up this backstory with him and the Cardassians specifically with this in mind. And I don't know if that's true, but they really, like, gave O'Brien this, like, history with the Cardassians in Next Generation, and then he moves over here where it's, like, super relevant.
Yeah, that was in the... I forget what that episode was called, but that was the one where Gul Dukat was Gul Masset or something like that. And then O'Brien witnessed a horrible massacre that caused him to be racist against Cardassians.
Yep.
And then he kind of learns the lesson, like, well, maybe there's a little gray area there, too.
The Wounded is the name of the episode where he's like, they're having to stop this captain from going to war against the Cardassians or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And then, yeah, the captain actually turns out to be right in that episode.
Yep.
But it's just like, even if you're right, we can't do it this way or whatever.
Right, yeah. That's like central to what you're talking about is like, yes, he's actually right that the Cardassians are building up like this force to use against the Federation, but Picard's like, this is not the way that we can't do this. We can't do it this way. You can't just go around attacking them because you think this is the case, which things get a lot grayer as we start getting into Deep Space Nine. But
that was a pretty good episode.
Yeah, and it introduces what becomes in Deep Space Nine like O'Brien's theme song. Like it's often in the background when something important is going on with O'Brien, and it's called like the Minstrel Boy, which they sing in that episode of The Next Generation. Like his former captain's like, what was that song that guy always sang? And they sing it in the episode, and then if you pay attention to the music in Deep Space Nine, it becomes like his theme.
Oh, I never knew that. But it also introduces that battle that he was in, which I forget. I think it's in Deep Space Nine where we flesh that out more, that actually he was like a hero in that battle.
Yeah, the Setlik 3 massacre.
Yeah.
They mention it in this episode. He's like, because Bashir's like, they wouldn't attack a Federation outpost, right? And O'Brien's like, you ever hear of the massacre at Setlik 3?
Yeah. He also has the great lines like, sir, have you ever served with any Bajoran women?
Yep.
And then that, yeah.
Sisko's like, no? Why? And Brian's like, no reason, you know.
Whenever somebody says something like that, it's always like, yeah, that was a great introduction of Kira, too.
Yep.
Like, I feel so, Sisko and Kira, I'm trying to think what other characters get really good introductions this episode. I think they're the main two.
Well, you get the introduction to, like, Odo's power, which is unexpected in the extreme when it first happens. Like, the dude, they're stealing, like, Nog and Random Guy are stealing ore samples, and when they get surrounded, the dude has like a morning star or something.
Yeah, he has like a flail,
and he chucks it directly at Odo's face. Like he is 100% willing to murder one of the security people when he is already surrounded. Like, he is super hardcore.
He has, like, phasers pointed at him.
Yeah.
And I'm like... I'm watching that, I'm like, what if he did that to Cisco?
Yeah, exactly. Like, this guy was just 100% all out from the beginning, and it was like, well, I guess it's really lucky it happened to Odo then.
I guess you could make the argument he knew Odo, and he knew it wouldn't kill him, and it would just slow him down, or something like that.
I don't even know if it slowed him down. Like, I feel like if you knew what Odo could do, you'd be like, okay, well, there's no point in throwing this thing at him.
Yeah, it'd be like, okay, Odo's here, and also these guys with phasers. The heist is done.
Yep, so that was a good intro there, and Bashir gets a good scene because Bashir has his scene with Kira where he's like,
it's not good for Bashir.
No,
but it's a good scene.
He's like, I want to do border medicine out here where there's like no civilization or whatever, and she's like, I live here, asshole.
That's something I've always felt is like a little, is good to address in a show like Star Trek. Because it's like, they're going to all these weird planets. It's like, oh, we're on the final frontier and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, but, people live here. It's not the final frontier to them.
Yep.
Okay, what else? Also, that scene introduces us to Nog, which I have a point I want to address, which is the Quark family tree.
Mm-hmm.
So in this episode, we have Quark and Nog.
Yep.
And Nog is the son of Quark's unnamed brother.
Right.
And we see Rom, but I don't think he's even credited as Rom in this episode.
No, yeah, I think he's just in the background when Nog gets captured.
Yeah, and I think we see him running a Dabo table or something.
Oh, maybe.
In one scene, and that's it. So, I remember from a while ago, watching Season 1, where it seemed pretty unclear that Rom was a member of the family. Or not, so that's just something I want to track as we watch these episodes.
Yeah, I don't know that it's... Yeah, I think I know what you mean. Like, I don't know that it was planned at first, that this character would be that character. It was just like, this is another Ferengi in the background until we decided to make him something else. Like, we can see.
There's a line in one episode where Quark's like, my assistant Rom will take care of that. And it's like, you mean your brother Rom? Yep. Oh, and Morn... we have to mention Morn is also in this episode.
Can't have too much Morn.
Yep. So let's just they had that Morn costume and they got use out of it.
And there's and I want to note that there's a Star Trek in general in this era, but particularly I feel like Deep Space Nine gets so much mileage out of reusing actors in different alien roles.
Oh, yeah, for sure, yeah.
And, if eventually we'll hit Jeffrey Combs, who's, like, my favorite, and I love him. But
yeah, Jeffrey Combs has been, like, 8 different people in Star Trek or something.
In this episode, we get the captain of the ship that Cisco is on at Wolf 359 will later go on to be General Martok.
The Vulcan guy?
Yeah, the Vulcan guy.
Wow.
And I didn't realize that until I was watching it this time. And I was like, that voice is really familiar. And then I had to look it up, and sure enough.
Yeah, he's been on Voyager, his other stuff, hasn't he?
I think so. That sounds right. Hold on. I'm going to have to look him up. General Martok. His actor is named John Garman Hertzler Jr.
Wow.
So let's see what he's... Oh, does he seriously? Okay, so he plays some other characters in Deep Space Nine later that I didn't even realize. Yeah, Vulcan captain in Emissary, although he's credited as with his name slightly differently. And later he will play Laws.
Huh.
Does it say he was in Voyager? It does not mention Voyager.
Maybe.
Oh no, there it is. Yep, a Hirogen hunter.
Okay, yeah, I thought he was a Hirogen or something in Voyager. I seem to remember, but...
And he makes an appearance in Enterprise, or 2, and then an appearance in Star Trek Lower Decks. So, yeah, he's all over this.
Like, I feel like they have these actors that are just really good with alien makeup.
Yep.
Like the guy who plays Gold Dukat.
He's been in a bunch of stuff also. Yeah.
If I remember right, because he was a Cardassian in The Wounded. I'm pretty sure. And if I remember right, he's actually the guy because he has this really long neck. And he's the guy they designed the Cardassian makeup originally around.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So, yeah, they brought him back. And then Quark has been a Ferengi before, hasn't he?
He has absolutely been a Ferengi before.
Yep. So, I mean, good on them, bringing all these guys back.
Oh yeah, Mark Alemo, who plays Buell Dukat, he's been on Next Generation. He was a Romulan. He was Gul Macet. He was Frederick Laroche in the episode where Data goes back in time. He plays like a French card player. He was also in the movie The Last Starfighter, apparently. Which
oh wow, was he an alien?
He was a hitchhiker.
Huh.
All sorts of interesting things you learn going through people's IMDb. Look at that.
Yeah, exactly.
So yes, this is a decent start. I feel like this episode is probably a better hook to get you interested than like the first episode of The Next Generation was, which, except for Q, I can honestly kind of care less about most of what happens in Encounter at Farpoint.
Although kind of similar in that, like, Cisco has to convince these all-powerful aliens that human life is worth something, or you can.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
And I guess the first episode of Voyager also has a weird all-powerful dude, but that's a different sort of situation.
Yeah, that's more like, I haven't seen that in a long time.
No, it's been forever since I've seen The Caretaker, which Voyager I was never the hugest fan of, so I am,
Oh yeah, one point I want to make. So the opening of the show was making me think of All Your Base.
Okay.
You know how it, like, flashes the text, and it's like, on Stardate 463, blah, 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 war was coming.
Oh, okay. So you mean like the scroll, like the Star Wars scroll at the very beginning. I thought you meant like the opening song or whatever.
No.
Okay.
And then, like, it's like, Picard, it's like main screen turn on, and then, like, Picard is on the screen, and he's like, all your planet are belong to us, or whatever.
What'd he say?
Yeah. What'd you say? No. Also in that scene, I want to point out that, I mean, it's fine. Because the thing about Star Trek is, like, the special effects are always kind of secondary. But it's like, Cisco's wife gets killed by girders and struts falling from the ceiling.
Yep.
And people are always getting killed by these girders and struts on the ceiling. And we never see them until they fall down and kill people.
It's true. How often do you see the ceiling, though, in general?
You see it a lot in, I feel like, Next Gen of the bridge.
Oh, of the bridge, yeah. I think
other than that, you're right.
There's a big window at the top of the bridge, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's like a big, like an oculus or something, whatever you call that.
A domey thing, yeah.
Yeah. Another point, Jake is the anti-Wesley.
Okay.
I feel like the writers of Deep Space Nine so badly wanted to show that they could correctly write a kid. And the result is Jake. And as a result, I love Jake. I mean, he's whiny when kids would be whiny, but he's also, he's got personality.
Okay, I'll allow it.
Oh. This isn't really relevant this episode, but how often do people lose at Dabo?
Okay, so I agree. In this episode, it seems ridiculous because the Cardassians are just stacking up all of their money. Like, look I've got pounds of latinum that I have just won at Dabo, which is ridiculous. But I think the idea is that it's happening a lot. Like, the majority of the time people are losing, and just every once in a while you hear, like, during most of the series, you're like, Dabo!
Yeah.
And that's when it draws your attention. So you're like, oh, it's happening all the time. But if you just assume that it's going on in the background at all times, and it's only at those points that somebody's winning, then it's not that often.
Yeah. So they just always choose that moment to, like, establish that we're in Quark's bar.
Yeah.
It's like, someone at the Dabo table yells, Dabo! And then we pan over, and then someone's sitting at the bar, and the scene starts.
Well, and of course, I don't know how many people, like, there's always a bunch of people around the wheel, so maybe lots of people can play Dabo at once, and only one guy wins. I don't know.
Sure. And everybody's always excited for them.
Yeah.
I don't know. Or it could be like, well, yeah, that wouldn't exactly work. It could be like craps, where you, like, kind of, you bet with or against the shooter.
Oh, yeah.
or something like that.
Hottest Doppel.
And then, okay, the last thing I wanted to bring up is all characters on Deep Space Nine are kind of the opposite of their next gen counterpart.
Okay.
So, like, we already talked about, like, Sisko and Picard. Yep. Kira is, she's got her own agenda, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's not going rogue, but, like, she's got her own things that she cares about, and she doesn't care at all about Starfleet.
Right.
Whereas Riker is the ultra Starfleet careerist, and he'll follow orders no matter what. What other ones did I have? Worf is an ultra hard warrior, but Odo is made of goo. And
I feel like Odo is, I mean, despite the fact that he's fighting people a lot, like on some level he's kind of pacifistic. Like he doesn't like weapons for one thing.
Sure.
And so like he's gonna capture these guys, but he's not the guy that's gonna like kill them if he can do anything to avoid it, which is not Worf's thing exactly.
Yeah, it's like Worf wishes he had like a sword all the time. Like famously, Worf is always the guy being like, it's like Shield's captain or whatever.
Can we shoot them yet? Okay.
Yeah.
Just let me know when we can shoot them.
He's like, the correct solution is to open fire. Let me know when you come to that conclusion too. Okay, so who else we got? Oh, Quark and Guinan. Quark has big ears. Guinan has small ears.
Guinan has big hats. Quark doesn't like hats.
Yeah, exactly. Quark is a no-hat kind of guy. Yeah. LaForge is blind and hopeless with women, but O'Brien is happily married and has fully functional eyeballs.
See, I think it's Data who introduces O'Brien to his wife, so LaForge just needs to have Data hook him up.
Exactly. I don't know. Did that ever happen?
I don't think that there's an episode where like they're setting each other up on dates or anything like that. Yeah. That doesn't feel like a Next Generation thing to me.
I'm sure there's episodes where like Geordi is interested in someone, and then Data's like, "Well, what's going on with you and her?"
Data's also not the one that you go to for like relationship advice. So despite the Geordi and Data being like good friends, I don't think that he's like telling his relationship woes to Data necessarily.
Yeah, I kind of wonder what that introduction scene was like between O'Brien and Keiko. Like, it's not like Data was like doing a match, like experimenting with a matchmaking subroutine or something like that.
He is a dating software in himself, yeah.
It's like, I have noticed that humans often like to facilitate pairings among their friends. To that end, I would like to introduce Keiko to Miles O'Brien.
I don't want to start with LaForge. Like, I alienate him right off the go if I mess it up, so I'm going to go a little bit down the friend ladder and start with O'Brien.
I have noticed that no matter how many dates Geordi goes on, they always end badly. Therefore, I will not attempt to set him up with another crew member.
Probably for the best.
Okay, that's all the points I have. What about you?
Let me think for a second. I think we hit most of the stuff that I wanted to talk about. The whole the moving the station thing always struck me as like we need O'Brien to pull like a Scotty and do something completely impossible right off the bat so we can establish his cred.
It's like, what if we lower the inertial mass of the station? Well, that's a neat trick.
So, yeah, I mean, I felt like that was kind of out there, but we do a good job, like, introducing Cardassians as, who are going to be the recurring bad guys. I love the scene, like, where Dukat gets introduced, and he's walking in the office, like, well, this used to be my office, so I hope you don't mind if I'm just an asshole.
Yeah, he basically says, like, I'm just going to be a recurring antagonist on this series.
Yep.
And Sisko's like, all right, sounds like some good drama. Let's do it.
Good plan. I'll pencil you in.
Yep. I do want to say about this episode, I feel like the last half, like the stuff with the prophets is kind of interesting, but like the general, like, they go into the wormhole, and the Cardassians go into the wormhole, and they have to move the station and all that stuff, was a little like they have to do something exciting.
Yeah. I mean, we end up where they need the show to be, I guess, which is like, we need an excuse why this mining station is going to be at the mouth of the wormhole to establish, this new status quo.
Sure, exactly.
But yeah, I feel like they had to go a long way to get there.
So, I mean, you can't really fault it, because you kind of think, like, what would I do if I was a writer? And you're like, you got to connect point A and point B somehow.
Yeah. And
they got through it pretty fast, so. So, how do we want to rate episodes? I feel like we should just do your rating and my rating.
Okay, but what are we going to rate them, like, out of?
I say, whenever I have a whole thing about ratings that I've argued with people online, which is either you think it's, like, you have a mild positive or a strong positive, or a mild negative or a strong negative.
Okay.
Like, in my opinion, that's as, like, as much granularity as you can get.
Okay.
In rating something, because, like, you watch something, you're going to enjoy it different amounts when you watch it twice. Some people do, like, 100-point scale and stuff.
So if we've got 4 points, basically, then what's we could do rankings based on how many pips are on a collar. So captain has 4, so the captain is a strong positive, and then you got, like, what's the 3's commander, and 2 is lieutenant, and 1 is ensign. So we could do that.
Yeah. Wait, so 3 commander, 2 lieutenant. Yeah. That makes sense. And then we could do, like, a lieutenant commander or lieutenant junior grade, or
if you have some middle opinion, sure. If you want to break it down more. So are we doing, like, are we rating it as, like, in general, a television program? I feel like it's this, or we're doing it, like, in terms of Deep Space Nine episodes, or in terms of Star Trek episodes, or like.
I feel like let's keep it in terms of, like, Deep Space Nine.
Okay.
Because I don't feel like we're going to feel like this is a good Deep Space Nine episode, but a bad Star Trek episode. I can't think of any, like, episodes.
Yeah. Okay, that's a fair point. I mean...
So, just within the general Deep Space Nine Star Trek level of quality.
Okay. I'm going to go for... You know what? You opened up to it. I'm going to say lieutenant commander, which, I guess nice. that's like very slightly positive.
Yeah. I'm going to give it a solid commander.
Okay.
Just because of, I feel the character work on the show, as we've been saying, I think the character work on the show is, like, the strongest aspect of the show, by far.
Yep.
And I think this episode did a really good job starting that. And it did a, good job world building. Pretty enjoyable for like, especially compared to, like, Encounter at Farpoint.
Yeah,
it's like, I feel like it's a pretty strong, like, out the gate first episode.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I you're right. We've been talking about it, but the character work on the show is, because you look at, like, Next Generation, none of the characters, maybe you could say Data a little bit, none of them really evolve much from season 1 to season 7.
Sure.
And you jump to, like, Voyager, it's almost like they're trying too hard at some of that, and you bring, like, 7 of 9, and they're like, we need 7 of 9 to change, like, every episode practically to just evolve as a human being, and it's like, okay, well, that was a little far.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that they really hit a good spot character-wise with this show, and this one gives us a good base line for most of our main characters. We didn't mention right. Dax. Dax gets...
Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about Dax.
Yeah, she gets a little attention, not a whole lot of attention, but we get... that was one of my points that I'd forgotten about, was Trills. We get a main character who's a Trill here, which we've seen one time before on Next Generation, and
right.
they look very different now than they did in that episode.
Yeah, they didn't have spots or any of that stuff.
And they had, like, a whole head prosthesis thing going on. I think they decided for, like, a regular weekly character they didn't want to deal with.
Yeah, it's almost like we already have Odo, we already have Quark,
yeah.
we already have Kira. Let's just put some spots on her. Like, let's not overload this stuff. Like, give the makeup artists, like, a little bit of, like, break.
But long term, Dax is one of my favorite characters, so I'm glad to just throw something out to her. Cause
long term maybe. I feel like in some of these early episodes, her acting is a little iffy.
I think they don't know what they want to do with her at this point.
Yeah.
She's like the young girl who has all this experience, and they're not sure which way they want to go with it.
Yeah, she's like I forget how old the Dax symbiote is supposed to be, like several centuries old.
Yeah.
And then she's supposed to have all that, I think she was definitely playing more towards like the old man side in this episode.
Yeah. She's like, I'm the same old Dax, and it's only later that we get to know her, Jadzia, more as a personality. Apparently, Dax the symbiote was born in 2018. So...
Oh wow! So 4 years old.
But yeah, this is 2360, 2370, somewhere around there.
Sure.
So 350 or something.
350, something like that. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we get into Dax. I don't think they know anything about Bashir yet.
He's this like very young, just very gung ho, like. And even we were talking about before we started about his appearance on The Next Generation, and I watched that clip, and he's just like this young guy who is all energy and all like go and is not thinking anything through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And of course, there's a very important aspect of his character that has not been introduced yet, and I don't remember when they introduced that.
I feel like it's like season 5 or 4 or something. Like it's a while.
Oh, okay. I thought it was earlier than that, but we'll see eventually.
Yep.
I guess
We'll get there.
Okay, and then Quark. Quark was set up pretty good. Quark was Quark. He's very identifiable as Quark.
Yeah, he's very easy to... his character in general is easy to understand. He's a Ferengi, although he is the franchise's way of kind of tempering what we've seen of Ferengi. Because when they first show up in Next Generation, they're like animals practically, and so we're getting more of a...
Yeah, like they completely revamped the Ferengi in this show. And it's... I think everybody agrees for the better.
Yeah, it's not nearly as racist as it was.
Also, Quark has a pretty good point in this episode where, like, if the government's going around calling itself the provisional government, you just know there's like guillotines, like, about to get wheeled into the public square. And he's like, I don't
want anything to do with this. No.
Yes. Quark, Odo, pretty good. I feel like that was like watching this as a person who's watched Deep Space Nine, when he's just all of a sudden is like, I was found in the Denorius Belt. You're just like, whoa, we're doing this? So, I already, I watched the Mild Fuzz TV guys review of this episode, and they were like, oh, he's the Bajoran Superman? Because, he's from a different planet. He was found.
Oh, I wasn't even taking it that far. I was just like, I mean, he's got some powers. He's not Superman exactly, but okay.
He's got some pretty good powers, too. He's the Bajoran Superman with the powers of the T-1000.
The power to melt.
Yep. The power to look kind of human, but not really. And then turn into goo.
Yep.
Yep. O'Brien, we already know.
O'Brien's doing pretty well for himself as an enlisted man to become like chief of operations on this station.
That's something that's always bothered me, is what is O'Brien... They say his rank sometimes, but it's like, how does he really fit in to the hierarchy of Starfleet?
Early on in The Next Generation, his rank was inconsistent, and it's only like later on when he becomes a more regular character. He's in the first episode of The Next Generation. He's one of the bridge crew on the like battle bridge when they separate out the to escape from Q or whatever. So he's been there from the beginning, but he was always like the other guy who nobody paid much attention to, so they could get away with making his rank all weird.
Sure.
But I think it makes sense. As far as, like, some people who've been in the military, they know that, the sergeant in the platoon is often, like, the guy who's been there the longest and knows the most, even if he is outranked by all of the officers or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it just kind of, like, brings up kind of some questions about Starfleet that you don't usually think about. Like, do the enlisted people go to the academy, or how does any of this work? Like, are there like enlistment, like what are those places called? Like recruiting centers,
right?
Where you can just go and they're like, we'll teach you how to be a transporter operator. Give us 6 years of your life and learn a technical skill or whatever. So,
I feel like enlisted personnel must not go to the academy. That must be the difference. I don't know what else the difference could be.
Yeah, I mean that's the difference in the real world. So, of course, in the real world, there's like officer candidate school and stuff like that too.
Yeah.
Anyway, yep, good episode. Let me think of a sign off here. We didn't even come up with a title for the.
Nope.
We'll think of something soon, and then I'll put the title on the video. We should just do an episode where we think of a title, but I don't want to do
that. Yeah, you need like a good catchy sign off or whatever. I'm trying to think. I'm looking at like random Deep Space Nine quotes. It's like sure. they were all true, even the lies, especially the lies. I don't know how that works, but
yeah. What's a quote from this episode?
Okay, hold on. DS9, the Emissary quotes. Here we go. Quotes. Computer, you and I need to have a talk. Never trust ale from a God-fearing people or a Starfleet commander that has one of your relatives in jail.
A little unwieldy.
Yeah. I suppose you want the office. No, that doesn't work. Drop by anytime you're feeling homesick, he says to Ducat. So there's that.
Okay, yeah, there we go. Okay. And drop by anytime you're feeling homesick. do.